My name is Daniel Ross. I was 44 years old, a structural engineer living in Maple Grove for the past 8 years. When my wife and I moved here, I thought we had found the perfect refuge from city stress quiet streets, trimmed lawns, children riding bikes safely in circles. It was the kind of suburb that looked like a picture in a real estate brochure. For a while, it was. Then Annette Witford became president of our homeowners association. Annette was 52, unmarried, and armed with a clipboard that never left her side. She wore navy blazers as if she were headed to court, and she enforced the HOA rules like they were sacred scripture. Too many weeds in your flower bed. Citation, toys left outside after sunset. Fine, grass half an inch too tall. Expect a certified letter in the mail. Most of us grumbled but paid, not because we respected her, but because it was easier than fighting her endless barrage of paperwork. She believed Maple Grove thrived because of her rules. In truth, we survived despite them. That Tuesday morning began like countless others. At 6:30 sharp, I poured my coffee and watched from my window as Annette marched down the street, clipboard clutched like a sword. Her hair was scraped into a bun so tight it looked painful. She paused at the Coulter's house, scowling at the trash bins still by the curb. Her pen scratched furiously. Mrs. Coulter ran out in a bathrobe, trying to explain she'd been up all night with her twins. But Annette ignored her, jotting notes like a judge passing sentence. I shook my head. Same routine, same theater of control. But then I heard it one siren, faint but distinct. Then another. Soon the wail multiplied, weaving into a chorus that didn't fade like traffic accidents usually did. I stepped onto my porch. The morning sun was soft, the lawns damp with dew, but the sound carved into all of it, louder with every minute. Across the street, my neighbor Tom Solano slowed his jog. He tugged out an earbud. "Danny, you hearing this?" "Yeah," I said, something big, before we could speculate. 6 helicopters thundered overhead, flying low enough that the gutters rattled. These weren't news choppers. They were military dark green. Fast, deliberate. I shielded my eyes, unsettled. Annette finally looked up, her expression sour. "Mr. Solano," she called sharply. "Your recycling bin is still visible from the street. $50 fine." Tom stared at her like she had sprouted horns. "Are you out of your mind? Look at the sky. Emergency services handle emergencies," she declared. "Our responsibility is order." My phone buzzed. A text from my brother Dion, who worked near the courthouse downtown. "Something bad happening. Stay home. Avoid the city. Lock your doors." I showed Tom, his face drained. But Annette marched on, pen scratching, muttering section numbers like a priest reciting verses. Neighbors began stepping outside, drawn by the noise and unease. Mrs. Coulter clutched her children. The Knowles peered out from their porch, worry plain on their faces. Even the college kids from the rental house wandered out, filming the sky on their phones. Smoke smudged the horizon beyond the tree line, faint but growing. The questions buzzed around. Was it an accident? Terrorism? A drill? No one knew. Only Annette spoke with certainty, barking about rules and procedures, her voice slicing through the fear. Everyone back inside. This is not the time for disorder. Then the scream came. It wasn't from the city. It came from the gray 2-story at the end of the street, the Moreno's house. The door banged open and Luis Moreno stumbled out. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd been mugged. His t-shirt was soaked crimson, his arm bent at an impossible angle. But when he lifted his head, my coffee mug slipped from numb fingers. His jaw hung slack, skin torn at the cheek, and his eyes were milk white, rolled back like he was already gone. "Luis, Mrs. Coulter called hesitantly. "Are you hurt?" He turned toward her voice and released a guttural, rattling moan. It wasn't language. It wasn't human. "The twins screamed," Tom whispered. Jesus. Annette stepped forward, clipboard raised like she could issue a ticket to death itself. Mr. Moreno, she barked. You are in violation of community standards, public intoxication, and disturbance of the peace. Return to your home immediately. Luis's head snapped toward her, and with a lurching, broken gait, he began to run straight at Annette. Luis barreled toward Annette with that grotesque, staggering speed, half stumble, half sprint. She stood her ground, clipboard raised, as if citing bylaws could stop what was bearing down on her. I dropped my mug, the coffee splashing across the steps, and sprinted forward. Tom reached his yard first, snatching up a rake leaning by the fence. Luis collided with Annette, knocking her flat on her manicured lawn. She shrieked, legs kicking, as his bloodied frame loomed over her. Tom swung the rake hard, the metal head clanging against Luis's shoulder. I grabbed his other arm, hauling with all my weight. His flesh felt clammy, like meat left too long in the fridge. Together we yanked him off her. Garage, get him in the garage, Tom shouted. Luis thrashed but didn't cry out, didn't protest, just moaned, wet and guttural. His eyes never blinked, fixed on Annette as if her voice had become the only gravity in the world. We dragged him across the driveway, shoved him inside Tom's workshop, and slammed the door. Tom jammed the bolt and hit the opener. The door motor whined as the panel rattled down. The moment it latched, Luis slammed into it from the inside. The steel rattled like a drum, each thud harder than the last. Annette scrambled to her feet, blazer askew, hair falling out of its bun. She snatched up her clipboard from the grass, her hand shaking, but her voice still carried that brittle authority. This is unacceptable. Assault on HOA leadership, property damage, there will be citations. I rounded on her. Are you serious? He nearly killed you? Her eyes narrowed, defiance flickering where fear should have been. Mr. Moreno is clearly under the influence. Disorderly conduct is still a violation. Another slam rattled the garage. Tom peered through the narrow window and blanched. He's ramming his head against the workbench, over and over. He's not stopping. Neighbors were gathering now. The Coulters clutched their twins on the porch. The Knowles shuffled forward, pale and trembling. Even the college kids from the rental house crept closer, phones raised to record. Everyone inside, I shouted. Lock your doors. The twins began to cry harder, their wails mixing with the distant blare of sirens and the relentless pounding from inside the garage. Mrs. Coulter tried dialing her phone with shaking hands. No signal. Calls won't go through. Overhead, helicopters roared again. So low the air churned with their downdraft. For a split second I saw a soldier leaning from one open side door, pointing toward our neighborhood with a radio pressed to his face. Then the chopper banked and thundered east, leaving us in a wash of smoke and noise. A new sound filtered in under the chaos a loudspeaker carried on the wind from the main road. The words were broken, distorted, but I caught fragments: mandatory evacuation, proceed immediately. Safe zones. The voice repeated, a drumbeat of urgency. Relief and dread tangled in my chest. Evacuation orders meant the nightmare was bigger than one neighbor losing his mind. Annette cut through the fear with a barked command. Everyone return to your homes. Section 12.4 during emergencies. Residents are required to remain on their property until official instruction. Tom's face twisted with disbelief. He's bleeding through my garage door and you're quoting bylaws. Her voice rose, desperate, shrill. Without order, we lose everything. This community survives because we follow the rules. Another crash thundered from the garage. The door bowed inward, the track groaning. Then a second sound joined it, higher pitched, quicker. A second moan. Tom's knuckles whitened on the rake. Maria, he whispered. She must have gone in looking for him. She's in there too. The realization rippled across the street. One monster had been nightmare enough. Now there were two, and both were trying to break free. The garage shuddered again, harder this time, as if two bodies slammed it together in rhythm. Each impact rattled the siding, making the bolts squeal in protest. Maria's moans blended with Luis's guttural growls, forming a terrible duet that drowned out the sirens for a moment. Neighbors pressed closer despite my warning. Fear drew them like moths to a flame, Mrs. Noel whispered. What's wrong with them? They look possessed. They're sick, I said, though the word felt hollow. Something's happening in the city. We need to go. But Annette had already recovered her poise, standing straighter, hair pinned back into its bun, blazer smoothed like armor. She planted herself in the middle of the cul-de-sac, clipboard raised high. Everyone listen. This is under control. We have procedures for disturbances. Protocol 12.4 remain on your lots until directed otherwise. That is binding no. I snapped, stepping toward her. Did you not hear the broadcast? They're ordering evacuation. This isn't vandalism or a bad flu. This is something else. The Coulters clutched their twins tighter, eyes darting to the black smoke thickening on the horizon. The helicopters circled again, their loudspeaker clearer this time. Attention residents, mandatory evacuation. Proceed immediately to the nearest designated safe zone. Repeat mandatory evacuation. The words were plain, undeniable, still. Annette's voice rose above them, desperate to be louder. Stay put. Panic will destroy Maple Grove. Order will save it. The HOA has authority here, not some vague announcement from outsiders. A metallic screech cut her off. Tom staggered back from the garage door as a hinge popped loose. The panel bent inward, warping under the relentless pounding. A pale arm shot through a growing gap, fingers twitching and bloody nails scraping the air. Gasps tore from the crowd. The purple-haired college girl dropped her phone. Mr. Noel made the sign of the cross. Tom, get away from it, I yelled. I'm trying, he shouted, bracing the rake against the door. But they're stronger than the panel buckled again. A jagged tear ripped through the aluminum, and Maria's face appeared in the crack. Her lips were torn, teeth bared in an animal snarl. She rammed her head against the gap, skin splitting on the steel, unfazed. Children screamed. Even the college boy filming stumbled back. Annette's voice cracked like a whip. Contain them. Do not allow unauthorized exit. They are in violation of community safety standards. I spun on her, rage boiling past fear. Violation. They're not residents anymore. There's something else. Before she could answer, a different roar filled the street. An engine. The college kids had scrambled into their dented Honda, the boy behind the wheel, the girl clutching her backpack. The car coughed to life, spewing smoke. He jammed it into gear, clearly aiming to make a break for the main road. Annette darted forward, heels clicking on pavement. She planted herself directly in front of the Honda, clipboard raised like a stop sign. Unauthorized evacuation will result in immediate penalties, she shrieked. Move, the boy yelled out the window. But she stood firm, eyes wild, hair whipping in the helicopter wash. Behind her, the garage finally gave way. With a deafening crash, the door tore upward, and Luis burst out, Maria clawing behind him. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, but terrifyingly fast. Blood slicked Luis's jaw, his shirt torn and soaked. Maria's mouth opened in a guttural wail that scraped the marrow. The crowd screamed, scattering in every direction. The twins shrieked. The Knowles stumbled back. Tom cursed and swung his rake uselessly at the air. And in the middle of it all, Annette still blocked the car, still shouting about fines and authority, oblivious to the monsters charging at her from behind. Chaos exploded the moment the garage door crumpled open. Luis and Maria burst out like rabid animals, their eyes milky, their jaws snapping. The crowd fractured in an instant, neighbors shrieking, children dragged toward porches, the Honda lurching forward as the college boy stomped the gas. Annette didn't move. She raised her clipboard like a judge delivering a verdict. Unauthorized vehicle operation. This is a violation of Maple Grove bylaws. The Honda swerved at the last second to avoid mowing her down, tires screeching. It clipped the curb and fishtailed out of the cul-de-sac. Annette staggered but didn't break her stance, still scribbling as if paperwork could hold back death. Luis lunged. Tom shoved me aside and swung his rake in a wide arc. The metal teeth caught Luis across the face, tearing skin but not slowing him. The sound wasn't human, a wet no rattling growl that made the hairs on my neck rise. Maria scrambled on all fours behind him, her mouth open in a keening wail. Inside, I shouted. I grabbed Mrs. Coulter's arm and yanked her toward her porch. She bundled her twins through the doorway, slamming the door as Maria's fingers clawed against the wood. Annette backed away, shrieking not in fear but indignation. Stop this at once. You are destroying property, Annette, I bellowed. Run. Tom hooked his rake into Luis's shirt and hauled, dragging him sideways toward the open garage. I threw my weight in too, shoving with all my strength. Together we wrestled him back inside, Maria snapping at our heels. Tom slammed the door shut again and rammed his toolbox against it. The hinges screamed as Luis battered it from the other side, but for the moment, it held. Everyone stood frozen, panting. Smoke from downtown thickened the sky, blotting out the morning sun. The helicopters thundered lower, their loudspeakers now distinct attention residents. Mandatory evacuation. Proceed to designated checkpoints. Leave belongings behind. This is a federal order. Relief flickered in some eyes. Someone out there still had a plan. But Annette's face hardened. She smoothed her blazer, lifted her clipboard, and spoke as if nothing had changed. Federal orders do not supersede HOA regulations. This is a community matter. We will wait for proper channels. Tom rounded on her, sweat dripping down his temple. Proper channels. They're monsters. Annette, you saw their eyes. They are sick, she snapped, and sickness does not void membership obligations. Abandoning your property now would be reckless. Section 12.4 clearly. Her words were drowned by another metallic boom as Luis slammed against the garage. Dust sifted from the siding. Maria shrieked with him, the duet of their inhuman cries searing the air. Neighbors scattered back inside their homes, bolting doors. A few huddled together in the street, torn between listening to the loudspeakers or obeying Annette's furious orders. The Knowles clutched each other, whispering prayers. I stepped closer to Annette, lowering my voice but lacing it with steel. If we stay, we die. I don't care what rule you quote. Her chin lifted. Order is the only thing that will keep us alive. The sound of breaking glass snapped every head around. Down the street, a window shattered in the Dunn family's house. A woman's scream split the air, then another. The infection was spreading, house by house, faster than anyone could process. Annette's knuckles whitened around her clipboard. She still opened her mouth, still ready to issue decrees. But for the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. And that was when the twins began to cry again loud. Panicked, echoing down the street like a dinner bell for the infected pounding inside the garage. The twins' cries seemed to ignite Luis and Maria. Their pounding grew faster, harder, rattling Tom's garage like a tin can ready to burst. Every strike carried a wet snarl, every pause filled with that guttural animal groan. Neighbors stood paralyzed, torn between running and hoping this nightmare might somehow still be explained away. Then, from the main road beyond the cul-de-sac, the military loudspeaker blared again. Clear this time. Attention residents. Mandatory evacuation in effect. Proceed to designated checkpoints immediately. Failure to comply is life-threatening. A ripple of relief and fear swept through the crowd. Mr. Noel turned to his wife, voice trembling but resolute. We should go. Now. We take the kids and go. Mrs. Coulter clutched her twins, nodding. Others began muttering agreement, already edging toward their homes to gather what they could. But Annette planted herself squarely in the middle of the street. Her voice cracked like a whip, cutting through the panic. Absolutely not. Protocol 12.4 of the Maple Grove Emergency Manual is explicit: residents remain inside their homes until official HOA direction is issued. Are you kidding me? Tom exploded, sweat streaking his face. He jabbed the rake toward his buckling garage. Those things are about to break through. You heard the soldiers. They're ordering us out. Annette raised her clipboard like a shield. The military is not authorized to dictate community governance. You leave now. You forfeit your property rights. Do you want to be homeless when this passes? Gasps and shouts answered her, disbelief breaking into anger. The purple-haired college girl shouted, "Lady, we don't care about your rules, we want to live Annette's voice." Rose, shrill with fury. "You will obey. Panic destroys communities. Discipline saves them. I am your president. Your survival depends on order." Behind her. The garage door groaned again, bending outward with each impact. A hinge popped, bolts straining against the frame. The sound silenced even the arguments for a moment. Maria's shriek rose high and keening, a sound that made every parent instinctively clutch their children. Luis hammered low and steady, denting the metal into a grotesque outline of his head and shoulders. "Daniel, Mrs." Noel pleaded, eyes wide. "What do we do?" I glanced at the smoke thickening above the tree line, the helicopters banking hard overhead, the soldiers' orders still echoing. I knew the math. Stay here and we'd be boxed in. Follow Annette and we'd die obeying a clipboard. We run, I said firmly. When they break through, we won't get another chance. A murmur of agreement rose, neighbors shifting, preparing to move, clinging to the hope of survival. Annette spun on me, face red with rage, sweat streaking her powdered cheeks. "You do not have the authority to decide this community exists because of me. You will stay in your homes until I say otherwise." "Look around," I roared, pointing at the garage as another blow buckled the door. "Your rules aren't saving anyone. They're going to get us all killed." The loudspeaker boomed again, closer now. Soldiers repeating the same command to evacuate immediately. The words carried the weight of reality that Annette's rules never could. But she refused to yield. She stood trembling, clipboard clutched to her chest, as if sheer willpower could hold the neighborhood together. The garage door split at the bottom, metal curling like torn paper. A hand pale, clawed, slick with blood shot through, grasping blindly. Children screamed, adults stumbled back. Annette still shouted above it all, her voice nearly hysterical. "Remain in place. That is an official order. Anyone who leaves will be fined, prosecuted, and stripped of membership." Her words no longer carried authority, only madness. And every second we hesitated, the garage bent closer to tearing wide open. The bottom panel of Tom's garage screeched and tore upward another inch. Luis's hand clawed through the gap, nails broken and bloody as they scraped the driveway. Maria's moans pierced through the metal, high and unrelenting. Every strike of their bodies against the door vibrated through the street like war drums. Neighbors panicked. Some bolted for their houses, slamming doors and locking deadbolts. Others shouted in confusion, frozen by the impossible choice: obey the military orders or Annette's shrieking demands. The Honda coughed to life again. The college boy behind the wheel yelled at his girlfriend, "Get in." Now. She scrambled into the passenger seat, clutching her backpack tight. The engine revved, loud and desperate. Annette reacted instantly, storming into the road. She planted herself directly in front of the car, clipboard raised like a stop sign. Unauthorized evacuation. This is a direct violation of Maple Grove Safety Protocol. Move that vehicle, and you will face severe penalties. The boy leaned out the window, his face twisted with fear. "Lady, move or I'll run you over." "You will do no such thing," she snapped, her voice shrill enough to cut glass. "I am the president of this community. You will comply inside the garage." Something gave way. The door jolted upward half a foot, then another. Luis's snarling face pressed through the widening crack, his pale eyes wild. Maria's hand groped beside his, scrabbling at the ground like a starving animal. Move, I shouted at Annette, my heart hammering. They're coming through. But she stood frozen in her role, clipboard trembling in her fist. The Honda lurched forward. At the last second, the boy swerved to avoid hitting her, tires shrieking as the car tore past. Annette spun, enraged, scribbling wildly as if she could write citations fast enough to hold reality together. The garage door snapped, metal shrieked, bolts flying loose. In a burst of chaos, Luis and Maria spilled out, their bodies jerking with a grotesque, unnatural rhythm. Luis slammed onto the driveway, skin torn and slick with blood. Maria scrambled beside him, her mouth gaping in a guttural wail. The crowd broke. Mrs. Coulter screamed and dragged her twins inside. The Knowles stumbled backward, nearly tripping over their own feet. Tom swung his rake in desperation, the metal teeth scraping across Luis's chest but failing to slow him. Annette, unbelievably, didn't run. She raised her clipboard higher, voice cracking but still commanding. Stop this immediately. This is a direct breach of community safety, Mr. Moreno. Mrs. Moreno, return to your home at once. Luis's head snapped toward her voice. Maria's milky eyes followed. And then, with horrifying speed, both lurched forward, drawn to the only person still foolish enough to stand her ground. Annette? Run! I shouted, sprinting toward her. But she didn't. She clutched her clipboard like a shield and screamed at them again. You are in violation of HOA protocol. Luis and Maria charged, their combined shrieks rising above the helicopters, the sirens, the cries of terrified neighbors. And in that terrible instant, every last person in Maple Grove realized the rules no longer mattered. The chaos of the cul-de-sac scattered us in all directions. Families slammed doors, curtains snapped shut, and the shrieks of Luis and Maria echoed down the street. I grabbed Tom's arm and pulled him toward the only place I thought we might regroup, the HOA office. It was a squat brick building at the entrance of Maple Grove, usually a dull space where Annette staged her little court sessions. Now it loomed like a bunker, our only chance at shelter. We sprinted across backyards, ducking under clotheslines and trampling flower beds. Behind us, the sound of pursuit faded. The infected were distracted by easier prey, pounding on doors, clawing at windows. Smoke curled from the horizon, heavier now, and a low, distant boom shuddered the ground beneath our feet. When we reached the office, the door was ajar. Someone had left in a hurry. I pushed inside, bat ready. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on rows of filing cabinets and shelves stacked with binders labeled bylaws, violations, delinquent fees. It smelled of dust and ink, absurdly ordinary amid the madness. Tom slammed the door shut and dragged a heavy chair under the handle. The Knowles stumbled in behind us, Mrs. Knoll clutching a crucifix so tight her knuckles whitened. A few other neighbors straggled in too, faces pale, eyes wide. We were a ragged group, bound by panic. And then Annette arrived. She swept in as if she still owned the building, hair frazzled, blazer streaked with dirt, clipboard clutched like a badge of office. Her eyes were wild, but her voice carried the same brittle authority. Everyone remained calm. This facility is designated as the Maple Grove Command Center. We will document all incidents, then file for compensation once order is restored. Tom's jaw dropped. Compensation? People are dying out there, language. Mr. Solano, she snapped. Your tone is hostile and unproductive. She dropped into the leather chair behind the desk, smoothed her blazer, and opened a violation ledger. The scratch of her pen filled the silence like a grotesque parody of order. I stalked down the rows of cabinets, trying to think like an engineer again. If we were to survive, we needed information maps, exits, anything that gave us a plan. My fingers brushed through files until one folder caught my eye, emergency correspondence. Inside were printouts of emails, their letterheads stamped with the county seal, the most recent dated 4 days earlier. Chilled me. Confirmed outbreak in metropolitan zone. Advise immediate evacuation protocols for surrounding communities. Secure transportation and inform residents at once. I froze, bile rising in my throat. Annette had known. She had warning days before the chaos reached our doorstep. She had chosen silence. "Tom," I said, handing him the paper. His face darkened as he scanned it, veins bulging at his temple. "Mrs. Noel looked from me to Annette, her voice breaking. She knew. Annette glanced up, unruffled. Those messages were preliminary, unverified. It would have been irresponsible to spread panic. Panic, I snapped, my voice echoing against the sterile walls. "Half the street's already dead because you buried this." Her lips pressed thin, but she didn't flinch. "Half the street is still standing because I enforced discipline. If we descend into chaos, we lose everything." Tom slammed his rake against the filing cabinet, the clang making everyone jump. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about weeds and lawns anymore. People are turning into monsters." Annette's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Mr. Solano, you still have a roof because of the dues I collected. You still have a community because of the rules I enforced. Without structure, we are nothing." The absurdity of it left me shaking. I wanted to lunge across the desk, tear the clipboard from her hands, but rage wouldn't save us. What mattered was the truth, because the more I read, the more I realized how deep her betrayal ran. And for the first time, the thought crept into my mind. Surviving Maple Grove might mean stopping Annette before she destroyed us all. I shoved more papers across the desk, their pages fluttering like dead leaves. Each one was worse than the last. Memos from the county, bulletins from the state, warnings stamped urgent, all of them dated days, some even a full week before Luis stumbled bleeding into the street. Evacuation recommended, possible contagion confirmed, secure all exits. Every line was proof that Annette had known and chosen silence. Tom gripped the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles went bone white. "She sat on this." She had it in her inbox while she was writing tickets for trash cans. Annette barely looked up from her clipboard. "Information requires verification. Without verification, it is gossip. My duty is to prevent hysteria, not fuel it." "Hysteria," I barked, shoving one paper into her face. "This isn't gossip, Annette. It's government orders. People out there are being torn apart, and you let it happen because you didn't want to lose control." Her eyes flicked to the document, then back to me with icy disdain. And if I had told them, if I had shouted evacuation with no structure, no plan, do you imagine the streets wouldn't be chaos already? At least this way. They listened. They listened. Tom spat. And now half of them are probably dead because of it. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the fluorescents and the occasional distant helicopter. Mrs. Noel wept quietly into her hands, her husband murmuring prayers against her hair. The younger neighbors shifted uncomfortably, looking at me, then at Annette, torn between the authority they'd always endured and the reality clawing at our walls. I rifled deeper into the drawer, searching for anything else we could use. My hand closed around a laminated map emergency routes highlighted in red. She had even prepared an evacuation plan, kept pristine here in her office while families screamed in their kitchens. I spread it across the table. "Look at this." She had the routes ready. She knew exactly where to send us, and she locked it away. Annette reached for it, but I slammed my hand down. "No, you don't get to hide this anymore." For the first time, something cracked in her mask. Her pen trembled against the page, a tiny stutter in the rhythm of her control, but her voice, though quieter, was still sharp. "If people leave without oversight, the community dissolves. Dues vanish. Properties collapse in value. Everything we've built here dies." I leaned closer, lowering my voice but sharpening every word. Everything is already dying. Annette, the difference is, you could have saved them. Instead, you let your obsession with power blind you. Her nostrils flared. She opened her mouth to retort, but the sound was drowned by a thunderous bang against the office window. Every head whipped toward the glass. A dark shape slammed again, leaving a smear of blood across the pane. Luis Maria, or another neighbor, turned already. The group cried out, pulling away. The window shuddered but held. Another moan carried through the glass, joined by others in the distance. The infection was spreading faster than we could run. Annette rose slowly, smoothing her blazer with trembling hands. This proves my point. Disorder is death. Follow me, and you live. Defy me, and you feed them. I stared at her, rage coiled tight in my chest. No, Annette, following you is what got us here. The banging outside grew louder, closer, a chorus of fists and claws against the brick. Our refuge was no longer safe. And every eye in the room turned to me, not because I wanted it, but because in that moment, I was the only one saying words that matched the reality pounding at our door. The pounding outside rattled the glass again, louder this time, as if the whole wall might give way. Shadows scraped across the window-twisted hands, gray faces pressing against the pane, their jaws working soundlessly before each dull thud. The infected weren't reasoning creatures. They were hunger in human form, and they were multiplying. I pulled the map closer, tracing the red evacuation routes with my finger. If we could break for the school 2 miles east, maybe we'd reach the checkpoint the soldiers had announced. But if we stayed here, we'd be boxed in. Tom leaned over my shoulder. His voice was hoarse but steady. We've got one shot. Grab whoever will listen and run. Before I could answer, I noticed something stuffed between the map pages and envelope, heavy with papers. I tugged it free and fanned them out. Bank statements, wire transfers. Tens of thousands of dollars moved from the HOA account to a shell company named Maple Community Solutions, LLC. The owner of record, Annette Witford. My throat tightened. She wasn't just hiding the outbreak. She was bleeding us dry the whole time. Gasps rippled through the room. "Mr. Noel whispered. "Dear God." Tom slammed his fist on the desk. "You stole from us while you let our families die?" Annette's face drained of color. She reached for the papers, but I held them high, away from her clawing fingers. For the first time, the mask of authority slipped entirely. Her voice shook. That money was allocated for community resilience. I safeguarded it. Safeguarded? I barked. You funneled it into your pocket, and when the government begged you to evacuate us, you buried it because you didn't want to lose your kingdom of fines and bylaws. Her eyes darted to the others. They weren't just angry now, they were afraid of her. "Please," she hissed, lowering her voice, "don't do this. They need to see me as stable. If they doubt me, they'll fall apart." "They've already fallen apart." I shot back, "because you made sure they never had a chance." Then Tom froze, his gaze fixed on the coat stand in the corner, where Annette had tossed her blazer earlier. The sleeve hung limp, the fabric stained dark with fresh blood. I moved closer. The cuff was rolled once, and beneath it, a strip of gauze peeked out, damp and crimson. "Take off the bandage," I said, my voice low but carrying. Annette stiffened. "It's nothing. A scratch. Take it off." Her hand clamped over her forearm, trembling. I said, "It's nothing." The room went dead silent. The banging outside faded to background noise against the weight of that moment. Tom whispered, "She's been bitten." Gasps erupted. Noel clutched her crucifix, her lips moving in frantic prayer. One of the younger neighbors backed against the filing cabinet, shaking his head in denial. Annette rose, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Her eyes blazed, voice sharp with desperate authority. Do not listen to him. I am your president. You will obey me until the very end. Her words echoed, hollow and terrifying, as the infected outside slammed harder, cracking the first line of glass. And every one of us understood we weren't just fighting the monsters clawing at the walls. We were trapped inside with one already growing among us. The glass in the HOA office shivered under another heavy blow. Cracks spread like spider webs, the moans outside rising in pitch. We couldn't stay. The map in my hands was no longer just paper, it was survival. Everyone out the back, I ordered, my voice cutting through the panic. Follow the route east to the school. That's where the checkpoint is. The Knowles and a few others didn't hesitate. They gathered what little they carried and rushed for the side exit. Tom held the door open, rake in hand like a soldier's spear. The air outside reeked of smoke, but for the moment, the path was clear. Annette slammed her clipboard down on the desk, her voice cracking like a whip. No one leaves without authorization. This community stays put until I give the word. I spun on her. You're infected, Annette. You're lying to them. If they follow you, they're dead. Her face twisted, a mix of fury and fear. I am the president of Maple Grove. My injury is irrelevant. What matters is maintaining order. Tom barked a laugh, bitter and raw. Order you're rotting from the inside out, and you're still quoting bylaws. More pounding against the glass. A corner of the window gave way, shards raining onto the carpet. A gray hand thrust through, clawing blindly. The group screamed, surging toward the back exit. I grabbed the map, stuffing it into my jacket. Move now. We bolted out into the open air, the nightmarish chorus of shrieks echoing behind us. The subdivision that had once looked so perfect was collapsing, doors splintered, windows smashed, cars abandoned with alarms blaring. Fires burned in 2 houses down the street, black smoke curling into the morning sky. We ran, the group thinning as some veered off to find their own families. Tom and the Knowles stayed close. Every step pounded with the truth we weren't heading toward safety, only a chance at it. At the intersection near Maple Grove's entrance, headlights cut across the haze. Military trucks blocked the main road, soldiers shouting orders through bullhorns. Checkpoint at Lincoln High, evacuation in progress. Move now relief surged through me until a figure stepped into the middle of the street. Annette. Her blazer was torn, her face pale, but she still held her clipboard aloft like a holy relic. She waved the soldiers back with the authority of a queen. I am the elected president of this community. These residents answer to me, not you. I decide who leaves and who stays. The soldiers froze, stunned by the absurdity of her words. The crowd behind us wavered, torn between hope and fear. Get out of the road, one soldier barked. Ma'am, you're obstructing an evacuation. But Annette only straightened, her eyes fever bright. I am not, ma'am. I am President Witford, and you do not overrule Maple Grove. Gasps rippled through the survivors. I felt my stomach drop, even here, at the edge of salvation. She was dragging us back into her delusion. I stepped forward, shouting over her. Don't listen to her. She hid warnings. She's bleeding. She spun on me, her voice shrill with rage. Lies. He's undermining the community. He wants to destroy everything we've built. The soldiers looked between us, uncertain. The crowd pressed closer, fear bubbling into chaos again. And behind it all, faint but growing louder, came the unmistakable sound of more infected moans drifting on the wind, closing the distance to our only exit. The checkpoint teetered on the edge of collapse before it even began. Soldiers shouted for order. Survivors pressed together in a frightened mass. And Annette stood defiantly in the middle of the road, her clipboard raised like a scepter. The morning sun had climbed higher, revealing the sweat dripping down her temples and the streak of crimson soaking through the gauze at her wrist. She's infected, I shouted, pointing at her arm. My voice cracked from strain, but I forced it louder. She's been hiding it. She's not fit to lead anyone. Gasps rose from the crowd. Eyes flicked to her sleeve, to the stain spreading beneath it. For a second, uncertainty cracked her mask. Then she clutched the clipboard tighter, thrusting it toward the soldiers. "Do not listen to him," she screeched. "This community is mine to govern. These people are under my authority, and you have no jurisdiction to contradict HOA law." The absurdity left the sergeant nearest her momentarily speechless. His rifle lowered slightly as if he couldn't reconcile a woman arguing bylaws with helicopters circling overhead and moans drifting closer from the west. "Mrs. Noel clutched her crucifix. "Please, President Whitford, let us go." Annette's face twisted, a snarl tearing through her authority. "If you abandon your properties, you abandon your obligations. Do you want Maple Grove to fall into ruin? Do you want chaos?" Tom stepped forward, fury burning in his eyes. He yanked the blood-stained gauze from her wrist before she could recoil. The crowd gasped as the wound was revealed, a jagged bite, swollen and discolored, the flesh already graying at the edges. "She's turning," Tom spat, "and she still wants us chained to her clipboard." The soldiers stiffened. One raised his radio. Possible infection at civilian checkpoint. Annette ripped her arm free, staggering back, eyes wide but still blazing with manic fire. "No, I am your president. You will not strip me of authority. Do you understand I kept you safe?" Her words no longer carried power, only madness. The survivors drew away, some screaming, some weeping. The children clung to their parents, staring at her with terror. I raised my voice above the chaos. "Listen to me." She knew this was coming. She hid the warnings. She stole from us. And now she's infected. If you follow her, you're walking into the grave. If you want to live, you come with me. The crowd swayed, torn. Some still hesitated, trained for years to obey her decrees. But others shifted toward me and Tom, toward the soldiers shouting for people to move toward the trucks. Then, from the west, the sound rose, a chorus of moans, guttural and growing. The infected were pouring down Maple Grove's main street, drawn by the cries and confusion. Their pale faces emerged from the haze, dozens of them stumbling, lurching, accelerating as they caught sight of us. The sergeant snapped out of his shock, barking orders, "Load the civilians, move, move, move." But Annette, clutching her clipboard like a holy text, ran toward the crowd, blocking their path to the trucks. "No one leaves. You are bound by HOA law. Stay in your homes, in your lots, in your order." Her shrill voice rose higher than the moans, carrying across the street. And like moths to flame, every infected head turned toward the sound. The horde surged closer, their guttural cries rolling down the street like a tidal wave of hunger. Annette stood at the center of the chaos, clipboard raised, shouting orders no one obeyed. Her voice was shrill, desperate, yet impossibly commanding, as if sheer force of will might bend death itself to the HOA bylaws. "Return to your homes. Remain calm," she screeched, waving her clipboard at the crowd. Section 12.4 is still in effect. The survivors recoiled from her, pressing instead toward the military trucks. Soldiers shouted, rifles raised toward the advancing infected. The sergeant barked, "We're out of time, get them on the transports." Tom grabbed my arm, eyes wide. "If we don't move now, we're dead." But I couldn't tear my gaze from Annette. She clung to her fantasy even as the world unraveled. Blood seeped down her bitten arm, dripping onto her blazer. Her face was pale, her eyes fever-bright. She wasn't just refusing reality, she was weaponizing denial, dragging others with her. The first infected reached the checkpoint perimeter. A gaunt figure in torn pajamas lurched forward, snarling. A soldier fired, the crack splitting the air. The creature dropped, but more pushed forward, relentless. Annette whirled on the soldiers, her voice filled with outrage. "Discharging firearms in a residential zone without HOA clearance, that is a violation of community safety." The soldiers ignored her, firing again, shouting for civilians to board. Mothers hoisted children onto the truck beds. Fathers shoved their families forward, panic overriding hesitation. I spotted the Knowles climbing into the nearest vehicle, Mrs. Noel still clutching her crucifix, tears streaking her face. Relief struck me. They had chosen life. Annette, though, doubled down. She planted herself in front of the truck, clipboard raised like a shield. Stop. These residents have not filed the proper paperwork. You cannot leave. The sergeant cursed under his breath. Get her out of the way, I stepped forward before he could. Annette, I shouted, my voice raw. Look around you. Your rules don't matter anymore. They're gone. The only law left is survival. Her eyes locked on mine. For a flicker of a second, I thought I saw recognition. Then it twisted into fury. You are a traitor to Maple Grove, Daniel Ross. You always were. And traitors do not survive. Behind her, the infected surged faster, drawn to her shrill commands. Their moans rose, their pace quickening, until the street was a river of pale faces and clawing hands. They weren't chasing the trucks, they were chasing her. Annette spread her arms as if addressing an audience. You see, they come because they sense disorder, stand firm, and they will respect the authority of she never finished. The wave of infected slammed into her like a living avalanche, knocking the clipboard from her hands. Papers scattered across the street, fluttering like broken wings. Her scream pierced the air as they dragged her down, clawing, biting, tearing. The crowd erupted in terror. Soldiers opened fire, trying to hold the line. Tom yanked me toward the truck. Daniel. Now I forced myself to turn away. The image of Annette's clipboard spinning in the wind burned into my mind. Even in her final moments, she was screaming not in fear, but in rage. I am your president, I am your president. The soldiers hauled us onto the truck bed. Engines roared. The convoy lurched forward, tires screeching over asphalt stained with blood and scattered papers. Behind us, Maple Grove dissolved into chaos. Annette's voice swallowed by the chorus of the dead. The trucks roared down Lincoln Avenue, engines straining under the weight of the survivors clinging to their beds. Smoke swallowed the neighborhood behind us, rising in black plumes from burning homes. Gunfire echoed faintly, then was drowned by the guttural chorus of the infected overtaking Maple Grove. I sat wedged between Tom and the Knowles, gripping the edge of the truck bed until my knuckles burned. Around us, parents clutched children, neighbors held each other, faces streaked with ash and tears. The air reeked of gasoline, blood, and charred wood. For a long stretch, no one spoke. The only sounds were the rattling of the convoy and the sobs of children who had seen too much. Then Mrs. Noel broke the silence, her voice trembling. She was supposed to protect us. That's what a leader does. Tom spat over the side of the truck, his face twisted in bitterness. She protected nothing. All she cared about was her throne and her clipboard. I stared back at the burning horizon, where Maple Grove once stood in its manicured perfection. I could almost still hear Annette's voice shrieking over the chaos, ordering us to obey even as the dead pulled her down. The memory chilled me more than the wind. She believed control was survival, I said softly. That if we followed her rules, we'd be safe. But the only thing her rules did was chain us in place while the world burned. Tom leaned forward, eyes shadowed, and she nearly chained us to our graves. The truck jolted over a pothole, sending everyone swaying. A little boy clutched his mother tighter, whimpering. She rocked him gently, humming through her own tears. Up ahead, the convoy slowed, soldiers dismounted, rifles at the ready, scanning the horizon. The lead truck pulled into the wide parking lot of Lincoln High. Floodlights blazed from portable towers, illuminating a sea of exhausted faces, hundreds of survivors corralled behind barricades, guarded by men in fatigues. As our truck rolled to a stop, a soldier helped us down one by one. You're safe now, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. Inside the gym, Medical will check everyone. Stay together. Safe. The word felt foreign, almost insulting. I looked at the people around me, the bruises, the bites hastily wrapped, the vacant stares. Safety wasn't real. Not anymore. We filed into the gym, its bleachers lined with families huddled under emergency blankets. The scent of sweat and antiseptic filled the air. A medic approached Annette's absence immediately, his gaze lingering on the empty space where authority should have been. He looked at me instead. "You were the one keeping order out there," he asked quietly. I hesitated, then shook my head. "No. I just tried to keep people alive." His eyes softened, a flicker of respect breaking through his exhaustion. Sometimes that's all leadership is. I sat with Tom and the Knowles on the bleachers. We didn't talk much. Words felt small against everything we'd left behind. But I could feel the unspoken truth pressing on all of us. Survival wasn't about rules, titles, or clipboards. It was about choices, hard, ugly, human choices. And in Maple Grove, one woman's obsession with power had taught us that better than anything else. The gym buzzed with restless energy. Families huddled together under thin blankets, the sound of muffled crying and whispered prayers filling the cavernous space. Soldiers paced near the doors, rifles ready, while medics checked wounds under the glare of floodlights. I sat on the bleachers, staring at my blood-streaked hands. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air, sharp enough to sting my nose. Across from me, Tom hunched forward, elbows on his knees, rake still clutched like a lifeline. The Knowles sat beside each other, murmuring prayers under their breath. Everywhere I looked, I saw what Annette had cost us, parents searching the crowd for children who never made it, empty stares where neighbors once joked about barbecues and lawn care, survivors stripped of everything but the clothes on their backs. A soldier approached, clipboard in hand, a different kind of clipboard, one that carried lists of survivors instead of violations. Name he asked, Daniel Ross. I answered hoarsely. He scribbled it down, then glanced at Tom. Family. Tom shook his head. His silence carried a weight words couldn't hold. The soldier moved on, leaving us in the hum of grief. Tom turned to me, voice low and bitter. "You know what burns me most? We didn't just lose to the dead. We lost to her. Annette's rules killed as many as their teeth did." I nodded slowly. She believed order was everything. That if she could control us, she could control the infection. But order isn't survival. Adaptation is... Mrs. Noel lifted her tear-streaked face. But why couldn't she see that? Why couldn't she just let go? I thought of Annette's final moments, screaming about bylaws even as the infected dragged her down. Because power was her religion, and she died preaching it. The words hung heavy, settling over us like ash. Later, I wandered toward the far side of the gym, where volunteers had set up a table with food and water. As I reached for a bottle, I noticed something fluttering near the door, loose papers scattered by the draft. Curious. I bent to pick one up. My stomach twisted. It was an HOA violation form, Maple Grove letterhead at the top. Somehow, through all the chaos, one of Annette's endless citations had found its way here. The ink was smudged, but the words were still clear. Resident Ross unauthorized vehicle parked on driveway. Fine $150. I let out a hollow laugh that earned a few glances from nearby survivors. Even now, even here. She lingered. Her rules had followed us past death itself. I crumpled the paper in my fist and tossed it into a trash bin. When I returned to the bleachers, Tom raised an eyebrow. What was that? Just a ghost. I muttered, and I'm done letting it haunt me. For the first time that day, Tom cracked the faintest smile. It didn't last, but it was something. The gym lights flickered, and outside, a distant chorus of moans carried on the wind. The nightmare wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for now, we had walls, soldiers, and a fragile thread of hope, and for the first time since Maple Grove fell, I felt like maybe we had a chance to start again. Night settled over the evacuation center, but sleep refused to come. The gym lights never dimmed, humming faintly above us, and the cries of children echoed against the high rafters. Every creak of the doors, every distant shout of a soldier outside, jolted my nerves awake. I sat near the bleachers, watching shadows stretch across the polished floor. The survivors around me were broken fragments of Maple Grove families missing fathers, mothers, children. The community that once obsessed over lawn heights and mailbox paint had been reduced to this shivering bodies huddled under military blankets. Tom lowered himself beside me. Rake laid across his knees like a relic of war. "You keep staring at the floor," he said quietly. I shrugged. I keep seeing her. The way she stood there screaming at monsters like they were delinquent neighbors. The clipboard flying out of her hand. It's burned into me. Tom's jaw tightened. She was already gone long before they got to her. The bite just sped it up. I nodded, but it didn't ease the weight in my chest. She should have protected us. She could have evacuated us days ago. Instead, she chained us to her rules and called it safety. He sighed, leaning back against the wall. That's the thing about people like her. They don't know how to lead. They only know how to control. And when the world changes, control kills. We sat in silence, the truth too heavy to wrestle further. Across the gym, Mrs. Noel tucked her crucifix into her hands, whispering prayers. Her husband rocked gently beside her, whispering back as if the words might stitch them together again. A soldier strode by, checking the perimeter. His boots echoed sharply, a reminder that order here wasn't fragile bylaws or fines, it was men with guns holding back the dark. I pulled the crumpled HOA citation from my pocket. I hadn't meant to keep it, but part of me couldn't let it go. I smoothed it flat against my knee, the ink smudged but still legible Resident Ross unauthorized vehicle parked on driveway. Tom noticed and let out a dry chuckle. She'd fine us from the grave if she could. I tore the paper slowly, piece by piece, until it was nothing but scraps. I let them fall to the gym floor, insignificant and powerless. Not anymore. Outside, a helicopter swept past, its spotlight cutting through the night sky. The infected still roamed beyond the barricades, their cries faint but unending. The world hadn't healed. It might never heal. But here, in this crowded gym, we had a chance to choose something different. To build a community that valued life over fines, humanity over power. As exhaustion finally pulled at my body, I thought of Maple Grove, the pristine lawns, the endless citations, the fear of stepping out of line. And I thought of Annette, screaming at death itself to obey her rules. I whispered into the dark, more to myself than anyone else. If survival means defying tyranny, then we owe it to ourselves to never bow again. The words steadied me. Because tomorrow, when the soldiers moved us again, survival wouldn't just be about running from the dead. It would be about remembering what not to become. And Annette Witford's downfall had taught us exactly that.